Hello and welcome to the third event for our SOURCE spring semester. Today we are joined by guest speaker Lexy deGraffenreid. She is the Assistant University Librarian for Special Collections Technical Services at Princeton University, where she manages the archival description and processing team and supervises the collection services team. Previously, she was head of collections at Penn State University's Eberly Family Special Collections Library. Her published work includes Adopting Person-Centered Praxis through Developing and Adopting an Inclusive Description Style Guide at Penn State, published by the Association of Canadian Archivists in the Field blog. She also wrote Engaging the Space Between Minimal Processing and Inclusive Description to Create More Sustainable and Ethical Workflows, published in the American Archivists, the Society of American Archivists semi-annual journal. She holds a Master of Science of Information degree from University of Michigan. She graduated from Michigan's program in 2015. Please join me in welcoming Lexy deGraffenreid.
Hi, everyone. So it's great to talk to you all today. I know I'm focusing mainly on the Society of American Archivists. I don't know how it's been almost 10 years since I graduated and I have been working in this field, but alas, here we go. Before I get started, to introduce myself just a little bit, after I graduated from Michigan, I actually started out in corporate archives rather than academic archives. So I started at the History Factory, which is a corporate archive out of Northern Virginia, where I worked with several corporate clients. I then transitioned over to Penn State a couple of years later in 2019, where I started as the processing archivist on a tenure track position. And then ultimately became the interim co-head of collection services. When my boss left, and then ultimately became the head of collection services, so in charge of basically their technical services team, managing everything from ingest through to processing. And while at Penn State, I did a full audit of all of our finding aids. I wrote the processing manual, most of our collection documentation for tech services, all of our inclusive description guidance. And that ultimately led me to Princeton, where I am now, which was a jump that I made about in January of last year. So moving from being in charge of a team of about 6 or 7 to being in charge of a team of 12. And so it's hard for me to consider myself mid-career because I'm still like, wait, I'm just out of grad school when I'm not. So I'm really happy to talk with y'all. Throughout my career, especially since I've been in academia, I've had a lot of service opportunities, both at SAA, but as well as at MERAC, which is our regional organization, and have gotten a lot of value from both of those organizations. And so I'm really happy to, talk and sing the praises of why our professional orgs can be so good for us. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So, the Society of American Archivists is the largest society for archivists in the United States. It's our largest professional organization. It's our oldest professional organization. Currently, it represents around 6,000 archivists from across the country. So it's real nice when you get to SAA and you see how busy it is and just how many of us are out there and what the diversity of our repositories is like. So the vision for SAA is that we empower archivists to achieve professional excellence and foster innovation to ensure the identification, preservation, understanding, and use of records of enduring value. And the mission of SAA is to promote the value and diversity of archives and archivists, and it serves as the preeminent resource for the profession. So, SAA does a lot of things, but it's really trying to be there, kind of at the forefront in this leadership position across, and as a networker to connect archivists. So it's really committed to advancing, the public standing of archivists, showing off what we do, raising our profile a little bit. Um, Trying to diversify the membership, trying to diversify the profession and its leaders in the archival record, right? Because as a history in our country, our archives have not been as diverse to represent the full spectrum of the human experience in this country or repositories collecting that worldwide. What is that worldwide cultural heritage? So they're also value fostering an open and inclusive culture, as well as providing service to the membership. This is a membership organization, so one of the primary functions is to provide that service to members so that they know what they're paying into, that they're getting some value out of that. And then also championing the goals of the profession and putting out there the code of ethics and the values for the profession around transparency, accountability, integrity, professionalism, social responsibility. That is really key to our work and core to our work as archivists. So who is SAA? SAA has a bunch of pieces to it. At the top of the organization is council. So SAA council, they are in charge of running the organization. They are voted into office by the membership, which we will get to. We have our appointed groups, so things like committees, task forces, boards, working group, representatives. We also have our sections. Our sections are for members. We have our student chapters at our different universities. We also have the SAA Foundation, which is the charitable arm. We have the SAA staff headed by Jackie Osafio, whose name I just badly mispronounced. So there is it's not just a voluntary organization. There is a permanent staff there to help manage the affairs. And as a membership organization, the organization is us, right? Council is made up of members. Section is made up of members. Every piece of the organization is made up of members. So members are really key and core to SAA existing and thriving. So this is a nice little diagram that kind of shows how SAA works, right? So the biggest piece of SAA is, of course, its membership. There's over 6,000 of us. Every year, we just had our elections. We then elect the council. And the council then appoints things like the committees, the boards, task forces, working groups, representatives, the affiliated group members. But the membership also is empowered beyond council to run its own affairs, right? So the membership itself creates sections, it creates roundtables, it creates discussion groups, it creates the student chapters. The membership elects the leadership of its own sections. So it's really a membership-driven organization. So more about SAA Council. This is our governing body. Their job is to make sure that we are stable, that we have money to continue ourselves as an organization, to develop the strategic plan, to implement such a thing, to provide leadership and direction for SAA, to advise its component groups, to advise its sections and its committees, to build relationships, and then oversee the staff and executive office. Council is elected to 3-year terms. So there is kind of this rotating piece of council where every year we are electing new folks to council. So there's some people rotating off and some people rotating on. We also elect the SAA president, the vice president, president-elect, and the treasurer. And then the CEO of SAA is an ex officio member. So currently, council is made up of Derek Mosley, who just got appointed president. He had been vice president until our most recent president had to step down for personal reasons. And then Mario Ramirez stepped into the role as vice president. We have Denise, who is the treasurer, and then you can see here the lists, the names of the different council members. And so it's really nice that one of each year there is a nominating committee who reviews all of the nominations for council, and they put together the list of candidates, and then the membership votes on them. And so it's really ensuring that council is made up of a representative voice of the archivists. And so that's been one thing in the last couple of years, being a member of SAA, that's been really encouraging, as there's been a real emphasis from the membership in electing a really diverse set of voices who are trying to enact really positive change for the profession. So there are a bunch of different types of groups. We have committees. There are a number of committees. For example, the membership committee, which I am a part of, is one of the main committees. A lot of these committees then develop services or events for other members. So the membership committee runs multiple programs. It runs the mentoring program, it runs career counseling. Another committee is for planning the annual meeting. So there is the program committee for each annual meeting. So they're the ones who are evaluating program proposals, accepting them, planning all the fun events, putting the program together. So all of that is kind of volunteer committee driven. Then we have the boards. Right now we have two boards. One is the American Archivist Editorial Board, and the other is the Publications Board. And so these boards really develop resources for SAA members. They're really focused right now on these more academic kind of publishing things, for which anyone can submit to try to be published. We also have task forces. These tend to be shorter term, more time designated things to deal with something that is very specific. So for example, the current task force is the Archival Compensation Task Force. So we're thinking about compensation across the profession and how salaries have kind of stagnated, and how low they are for many of our members, and how much of a problem that has been. We also have our working groups. These tend to be a bit longer lasting. They tend to deal with matters of special concern, but aren't necessarily time limited. For example, the Crisis, Disaster, and Tragedy Response Working Group has been around for quite a while, as has the Dictionary Working Group. And then, so the newest one on the block is the Section Health Working Group, which is taking a look at all of the sections that exist in SAA and how active those sections are, and whether continuing them or transitioning them to some other form or sunsetting them entirely is the best option. So this has been a multi-year project to think about the sections, because I think they have grown from a small number of sections to like over 30 of them. And so it just tends to be a lot. We also have our representatives. So these are individuals who are appointed by council to serve on other groups as SAA's representative to those groups. So for example, the Academy of Certified Archivists, the International Council on Archives, organizations like that, where we just kind of want to be a voice in the room, but it's not really SAA itself. It's more serving in an outward capacity. And then we have the affiliated groups. So there are a couple of groups that are kind of affiliated with SAA. I have a link that I'm happy to share this presentation to go kind of check those out. So how do you get involved in one of these many things? Anyone who is a member of SAA can volunteer. There is an application process that begins in January. You fill out a form. You kind of select the committees, the task forces that you're interested in being a part of, and then council goes through an appointments process. It's not that bad of a form. You can volunteer for multiple things and then you probably get appointed to one. Sometimes it takes a couple of tries, but it's a really great way, especially for newer members in the profession to get involved, is to start to volunteer for things. Um, there are also opportunities that sometimes pop up throughout the year. So you'll see calls for volunteers for specific things like the mentoring subcommittee or something like that. Um, Moving on to what our sections are. So the sections are really the place where most members will see kind of that day-to-day interaction with the association. So our sections are just communities of interest around a particular topic, a particular type of collection, an identity, an area of practice. Once you're a member of SAA, you're added to something called SAA Connect, which is kind of this connection platform. It's a social platform where all of these sections that you are part of exist. And there you can see that they have an email list. A lot of sections do programming. Every section has a section meeting around SAA. It used to be the section meetings were at SAA, but now post-COVID, they've moved online beforehand so that more members can join. And that tends to be an annual report and some sort of free programming that is tangentially connected to SAA's meeting, but you don't have to pay the registration fee for. But a lot of sections also have additional programming throughout the year. So sections such as accessioning, acquisitions, and appraisal, we have like 4 events over the course of the year, which tend to be like free webinars on a topic of really particular concern, like appraising born digital materials. Another section that is pretty active and has been in that way is the students and new archives professionals. They tend to have many events throughout the year. The description section tends to have a bunch of programming throughout the year. And so that's a way to really add value and connection to our members, in addition to these kind of email listservs where we're all emailing each other questions and connecting with one another. And then each section has its own website on the SAA site, and sometimes they will post resources applicable to that section on their site. Another thing, you can join as many sections as you like when you're a member. You can join as few as you like as a member. Cross-posting is a thing, but you can also limit the number of emails that you are receiving if need be. So for example, for all of my sections, I have a daily digest, which just compiles everything from that section into a single email a day, rather than every single one popping up. But we have so many different sections. And the nice thing about sections is that they're all made up of members. So there are so many ways to get involved, right? So section leadership is elected by the membership. We elect them every year. Section leaders for the following year are those nominations start to happen, which can be self-nominations in, I think, May. And then June is when we actually hold the elections. You can also just engage in the email discussion lists. There can be really valuable conversations going on there around practice, around ethics. And then just attend the meetings and some of the free workshops and some of the free programming. And the sections are a really great way to start networking. Particularly these leadership positions where you're having maybe monthly or bi-monthly meetings with other members who are from across the country. Some sections are much more popular than others and are much harder to get elected to than others. And some positions within them are easier to get elected to than others. So for example, when you see section elections, you may see 1 or 2 names for the president or vice president elect. But you might see like 8 or 9 folks for 2 slots for just the regular section members. And so it's a good way to kind of get your name in the game, start to get your name out there, and start to get active with your other members and start to do some networking. So I want to go a little bit further after that overview. So SAA does a lot of stuff. SAA does advocacy, it does education, it does services. One of the big things is this continuing education piece. So it's managed by a committee, the Committee in Education, and the SAA Education Department. So they have courses. The courses can be in person. Sometimes those are multi-day. But they can also be online courses. And some of those online are at a set time, and others are kind of pre-recorded that you can purchase. And those courses are a wide range of things. Sometimes the courses are free. So there are a couple of ones that have been subsidized through donations in order to be free, such as the ones on salary negotiation, which I highly recommend, especially as you're coming out of graduate school and going into that search. Um, and there's just a wide array of educational options. We also have within that two certificate programs. There's also like another track that's in motion about management, but the two well-known certificates are the Arrangement and Description Certificate and the Digital Archive Certificate. Both of these require attending a combination of courses and then taking an exam. But then you get to have that I am certified. Um, I don't have either of these certifications, so I can't really speak to these courses. But the requirements are kind of laid out pretty straightforwardly on the SAA's website. And then advocacy. So advocacy is something you may have seen if you're already on SAA's lists right now. There's a lot going on in archives world, a lot going on in libraries world that is kind of a threat coming down in this moment. So advocacy is a really important piece, that being the premier national organization in the United States for archivists that SAA does. So we have a committee on public awareness called COPA, which takes a look at things, provides advice to council. The council might release statements. There's been a couple of statements that have come up recently about developments at the National Archives around things like the destruction of government records. Then we have another committee on public policy, which is really focused on that actual advocacy on the Hill piece. And there's, of course, the membership portion is the issues and advocacy section, which is a very active section, which does quite a bit of programming. And they're also quite forceful in the community. So things like the task force on archival compensation came out of the work of the INA section. So these sections don't just kind of exist in a sphere. They can really impact what the association is doing and what we are doing as archivists in the community. We also have the foundation. So this is the charitable arm of SAA. It is a leading source of nonprofit funding that is not government funding for archives and archivists. They support research. They support professional growth and development opportunities. They award a lot of scholarships, travel assistance to SAA, awards. They also sometimes host programming, and they're trying to support archivists because we're not always a field people think to donate to. So it's a great way, for supporting students and early career professionals to do things like go to conferences, but also things like when disaster hits, providing some disaster funding. So some of the support funding, like I alluded to, is the Catalyst Fund, the National Disaster Recovery Fund for archives. So you'll see notifications out anytime there's like a major storm or a fire or something about like, hey, these applications exist. If your repository is impacted, please apply. There is the Mosaic Scholarship, which is a scholarship specifically devoted to increasing the diversity of the field. So that is a great scholarship for students of color. There are the Gerald and Elise Heim scholarships, and then there's a bunch of annual meeting attendance scholarships. So that's SAA, but what do you get out of it? So of course, as a membership organization, all of the members are contributing to the organization through dues. And in return, we get benefits of that membership, which are many. Um, so we have a bunch of kind of generic benefits, one of which is, of course, the access to the professional networks and communications, that communication platform, the access to the list of members, and the directory. Um, there are discounted rates to the annual meeting. There are discounted rates to the educational options, to the bookstore. You can be the members of all of the sections, which is where a lot of these more specific conversations are going on, like at the LGBTQ collection section, like they have very specific conversations around queer collections and describing queer collections and things like that. And then, of course, members get the American Archivist, and they also get Archival Outlook. Um, you can get it physically or just online. And then, of course, being a member allows you to be of service to the organization. So, um, it opens up those service possibilities on committees, on sections, and things like that, including, which might be of interest to some of y'all, there are dedicated kind of early career member positions on various groups, and a call for volunteers for that tends to come out. And then at some point in the year, the groups say, hey, yes, we would like to host an early career member this year. And that just allows earlier career members to kind of get a foot in the door to SA and to some of these volunteer opportunities because sometimes that feels very intimidating to just get started. And so having these that are very specific to supporting folks who are newer to their profession is a really great benefit to helping further professional development and networking at the organization. Um, We also host a lot of member services, and this is something I'm really proud of as a member of the membership committee. Um, so we run a bunch of different things. So the membership committee specifically runs the mentorship program for SAA, and we have two different types of mentorship programs. We have one-on-one mentorship, which you submit an application for, stating your interests, where you are, what you're looking for in a mentor, and we try to match you to that as best as possible. And it's a one-on-one mentorship match. Sometimes it can take a little amount of time to match people, but it's a 6-month commitment for both the mentor and the mentee. That after that 6-month period, they can continue on if they would like. And that's really helpful, especially for younger folks coming into the profession. Although that mentorship program is not specific to young professionals. We get quite a bit of mid-career professionals looking for some mentorship, people looking for career changes, people kind of trying to shift within the profession. So maybe they've been working in academia but want to shift to consulting. We also have mentoring cohorts. And this is something that we started. Uh, when did I helped draft the original cohort program? And I think it was like 2020 or so, 2020, 2021. And this grew out of a lot of interest to not just have one-on-one mentoring, but to think about peer mentoring as well. So we developed this program to have mentoring cohorts. The cohorts exist around specific themes. Those themes are determined each year based on some of the interests that we're hearing. So we've had cohorts around management. I was actually a member of one of the management cohorts as a new manager. We have ones on accessibility and disability for archivists. We've had ones for archivists of color. We've had ones for students and new professionals, ones for mid-career professionals. So it really depends each year what we think is going to make a good cohort. And those cohort, I think, applications come in, I think, late spring or early summer. They go up across the lists. Um, The membership committee also runs the Career Services Commons. So Career Services Commons is really more of a short-term, 1 or 2 session thing that is really specific to a member's needs. That member's needs could be resume review, it could be cover letter help, it could be interview prep, it could be interview practice. Um, so it's really rather than this longer term mentorship that can be more general, it's very specific to kind of career needs and career counseling. And that career counseling can be changing careers. I'm changing, what do I have to do to my resume to get this change in my profession? Or what sorts of professional development should I be looking into in order to achieve this path in my career? So it's not just necessarily job focused, but it is there to get peer support from another member of SAA on something that is more career job search focused. Membership also runs the Navigator program. This is a program for first-time attendees at SAA. So we match first-time attendees with experienced attendees who can kind of coach people through their first SAA, because that first SAA can feel a little bit overwhelming, and especially if you don't know as many people, can sometimes feel a little bit isolating. So they can help choose what sorts of sessions might be helpful, how to navigate, how to do some self-care, but also might just be a friendly face to grab a cup of coffee with, or a drink, or a meal, or something like that. One of the last program that membership runs is something called Key Contacts. So any new or returning member, so anyone who has let their membership lapse for over a year, gets a personal message from a member of SAA, which we call a key contact. And that will be someone local to their area, like their state. And that way, because when you join SAA, your first couple of months, you get a slew of like canned emails. And this is a way for a specific member to reach out to another member to say, hey, we're here. We're here to support you. Do you have any questions? And then sometimes there are questions that we answer, like, oh, actually, I have this question about this program, or I had this problem. What can I do about it? And then the key contact can get that member those resources. So beyond the membership committee, there's a bunch of other services that go on. Sometimes they're special or for emergency needs. So in 2020, there was an Archival Workers Emergency Fund that no longer exists. But you may have seen a few weeks ago coming out of SAA, support for federal workers, right? So a lot of workers have been laid off at the National Archives. So the SAA Council got together and determined, what can we do to support our colleagues at these organizations who have been unexpectedly laid off? So there is a whole list of resources for support on the website, one of which is free membership for a year, which also opens up things like career commons and mentorship in these other programs. So now that I've talked about all the fun stuff, what does it cost? Students have a very discounted rate for all the benefits that they can get them. It's only $55 a year for an active student. Even if you're still in that membership year, you stay at that student rate until your next renewal. So that's a really great deal for students, even if they may not be going to that specific SAA for a year, because it opens up things like the section lists where you can get further resources or ask questions. It opens up mentoring. It opens up career commons, which is really useful for that initial job search. And then the membership costs beyond that range from $105 a year to $325 a year for non-student individual members. That range is because the membership has a progressive stacking to it. So the higher your wages are, the higher your membership cost will be. So the lower your wages are, the lower your cost is to join the organization. So that $325 rate is for like when you are making $90,000 a year and over, versus that 105 is like $30,000 a year or less. So most folks are somewhere in the middle of that, and that's online. There's also a $55 bridge rate for folks who may be unemployed, right? So sometimes your project position ends and you haven't quite found your next employment yet, but you want to stay a member. So there is that lower rate for that. So since I've been talking about SAA, I wanted to just touch on what I've gotten out of SAA as a member. I've been a member for some time. I've had quite the journey through SAA. I started as a student when I was in graduate school. I joined right away when I started at Michigan because it was even cheaper back then. So I was a student member from 2013 till 2015, at which point when I had my job at History Factory in the corporate, I was like, well, they don't have any funding for professional development. What good is this to me? I don't make that much money. And so I let my membership lapse. And I rejoined when I got to Penn State when I was in 2019. And then all of a sudden I was on a tenure track and had to do service and volunteer and things like that. So the first section that first service that I did was for SNAP, which is the Students and New Professionals section. I was elected to the steering committee for a year. After that, I volunteered to be a member of the mentoring subcommittee because as a earlier career professional, I knew how important that mentoring piece was, and I wanted to help other members. And so I served on the mentoring subcommittee for 2 years. The mentoring subcommittee is, of course, a subcommittee of the overall membership committee, but it is kind of more of a separate entity that is governed by the membership committee. So when my term with that was coming to an end, I was like, but I like membership committee and I want to be of service to my fellow members for as much as I can. So I volunteered for the overall arching membership committee, and was ultimately appointed by council to serve a 3-year term on the membership committee. Within that term, which is ongoing, I served as the chair for Key Contact Subcommittee, as well as the chair for the Navigator Program Subcommittee. And I am currently the co-vice chair of that committee. So next year I might be the chair. I've also been vice chair, chair-elect, then chair, now past chair of accessioning, acquisitions, and appraisal section. But beyond kind of that leadership, I want to get into like all these other pieces of SAI that can help you. I've done a bunch of annual meetings. I've attended some of the online courses, some of which have been really helpful to me, especially things around XML. I've also given presentations at SAI, at the research forum, at section events. I was in the mentor cohort, as I said. So in addition to being on the membership committee, I was benefiting from the committee. And then, of course, I've published in a couple of different places. As Hilda said, I just had an article published in American Archivist. I published on the description sections blog, and then I have a book chapter in progress. So I just kind of wanted to get into like, when you seek out these opportunities from SAI, you can really derive a lot of value from your membership. And one of the greatest things that I have gotten from my membership is that networking piece and those leadership opportunities pieces, which have helped me to develop as a professional. So with that, I want to open up to questions.
Thank you so much. That was excellent, Lexy. Yeah, I mainly wanted to ask some questions about your personal experience. You were alluding to that in the last slide. Could you tell us about the first time you attended the annual meeting and what that experience was like?
Yeah, so my first annual meeting was in Atlanta, which was 2016 or 2017 or so, 20, I don't know. And actually, that was funded by my employer, by History Factory. And I roomed with my coworker. Um, and it was incredible. My boss was kind of grumbly because he was m much more established in the profession, but like these things, they're just social. What can we learn from these things? And I was like, a lot. I am learning so much. So while I was there, I attended every session. I went to there's a new members breakfast for early career professionals so you can start to network a little bit. Um, SAA is really busy. There's a lot of people there, and it's really awesome to see all those people there. We are also a profession that trends introverts. Um, and that can be a little overwhelming. Um, so one of the things that I've found really building there is that everyone understands that everyone just needs decompression time and nobody judges when you're like, I have hit my social quota for today and I will see you tomorrow. Um, and so there's the potential for events in the evening, and there is the potential to do tours or to do additional workshops, or nobody's policing what sections you go to. They're just like, here is the schedule, go find things. And so there's something for everyone, and there's always new projects, there's always new tools to learn about. And then there's the ways that you can just go hide to do something like last year I went and read in the park opposite the hotel for an hour because I just needed some quiet. Um, and then over time, I've built friendships with people who attend SAA. And so that becomes like running to different social obligations because I'm running to the SI mixer to go see my old friends from graduate school or seeing my old colleagues from past jobs, or the friends I've met through my volunteer opportunities, either through Merrick or through SAA, right? Like when you're doing those sections, you become friends with one another. And so then you hang out with each other at SAA. And it's also a great way for those networking pieces to happen, which I was always suspicious of networking until I realized how great it is. Because you'll be talking to somebody and you'll be talking about an interest or you'll be talking about a repository and they'll go, oh, I know so and so there. And they'll like go grab them and drag them over. And next thing you know, you're making a new connection. And so it's this educational piece, but also this social piece. And then a lot of times they're in cities maybe you haven't been to before. So there's this opportunity to kind of go off and explore. And we've all looked at the schedule and went, these sections aren't quite of interest to me this morning, so I'm going to go to the art museum. Everyone's done it.
Awesome. Could you tell us about your experience in the mentoring program, either as a mentee or a mentor or a cohort member?
Yeah, so I have not done one-on-one mentoring myself. I just flatly joined the committee because I wanted to help other professionals because as a young professional, I felt kind of lost. I didn't know what to do, where to go. So the mentoring subcommittee has two members of the membership committee on it, and then a series of other volunteers from the membership. And it's this really great group of people who really care and really want to support their members. And take really seriously what people put into their applications to try to kind of find them that perfect match and are always trying to think of ways like, how do we improve this program? Which is why when I was on the committee, we did things like shorten the duration because we found kind of after that 6 month mark, people started to kind of lose capacity. And so we were getting more volunteers with that 6 month piece. That's also why we decided to build the cohort program as a new peer modeling, which kind of flattens out so everyone is supporting one another. and building that network. And we can't always do it because like sometimes we'll get requests that are like super specific and we'll send out multiple requests and we just can't, there's nobody, we're as dependent on the mentors volunteering to be mentors as we are on mentees signing up. We almost always find someone. And then being on the cohort myself was really interesting because I'd helped write the program. And then 2 years later, I applied to be on one of the cohorts, not as a mentor. Um, because I was a new manager, I'd never done that before. There was no training for that. It was just your boss is leaving. Here are three people that you are now in charge of. Go have fun. And so it was really nice to not just have a mentor, but have a collective of voices, many of whom were in a very similar situation to me. And so the nice thing about the cohorts was because it was specific to a need that I had, I got a lot of specific value for that. So a lot of our cohorts, like our BIPOC cohort, because we are such a white profession, right? Like it's really nice. The mentees all say it was so good just to be in a virtual room with one another. Like that in itself is so helpful. Um, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Um, what sections do you presently keep track of, and where do you think the most interesting conversations have happened over the years?
Oh boy.
Hmm.
So there are so many sections that I don't know when it comes to the sections that I am not a part of. Um, I, in my experience, kind of back when I was on Snap, that was one of the most active sections. I unfollowed Snap when I realized I'd been working for 5 years and no longer counted as a new professional. So I'm not up to what they're currently doing. But when I was on Snap, we were doing like monthly events. Um, Obviously, as past chair of AANA, I'm very pro AANA. We just put out the national best practices for archival accessioning. We're now stewarding that. There's programming around that. We have multiple events a year that are educational and free. Description section is incredibly active. Issues and advocacy is incredibly active. College and university archives is also very, very active. I think they have like a monthly coffee chat. Um, some of the more niche sections, I think, tend to be a bit quieter. Like the military section tends to be very quiet. I'm not part of that. But that's why we're doing this section health assessment. And I would really say it's really about what interests do you have? So it's one thing to be part of a big section like description or INA, but if there's a very specific type of repository or skill set you're wanting to be part of that section and volunteer for that section. Because the programming only happens with the leadership to make it happen. So it's really up to the leadership of that section during the year to be like, we are going to do X. And so you'll have some sections where they're very active and some sections where like they're very quiet. And that might change year to year.
Thank you. Um, could you tell us a little bit about SAA's reaction to the firing of federal workers and what the process has been for like crafting these statements? How does it go through the body of SAA to uh, end up with a press release and more?
So a lot of that would be on council.
Hmm.
I I know that council had like an emergency meeting about it. And then the membership committee, so in my role as one of the leaders of the membership committee, we were brought in by council because they were like, what are your ideas for how we can help to support workers at this time? And so there was this really dedicated attempt on the part of council. I was not part of those discussions beyond my role in the membership committee, but I know there was a big push on council's part, on SAA staff's part to figure out something and figure it out quickly. And that took a little bit of time. It took a couple of weeks. But give me one second. Federal workers, there we go. So that internal of like, how does it become a press release? I don't know. But this is the resources for federal workers that got put together. There's also been a couple of statements that have come out. Specifically, I'm going to share my screen again. So I'm looking at the SAA website. This response to the firing of the American Archivist, this response to the firing of archivists, this one about the records destruction. It's so dark. But it's not just necessarily putting out statements, because there is the kind of CORDA piece. So I'm not sure what the legislative advocacy piece is that committee is doing, because I'm not part of that committee. But this piece, which is the resources for federal workers, this is the piece that I really love, and I felt really proud of how fast SAA was trying to respond, and how the membership committee was able to support, because then this opened up possibilities. So getting the free year of membership, which opens up a bunch of different things, making available freely some of the webcasts, and then of course the mentoring career services commons piece.
Could you speak to how active student chapters are? I was kind of unsure when setting up this event if this was like a normal request. What is the membership of students in proportion to overall membership? Do you know that?
Well, students in proportion to overall membership is going to be pretty tiny, because the actual working population of archivists is quite large. Different student groups at different campuses are more active than others, and a lot of them are, I think, more active within the campus themselves. But they will sometimes have a presence at the annual meeting. This is not the first or the only student group that we have talked about SAA to. So this is not like a abnormal request, and it's always one that we're happy to do. And so also that student membership piece is really on both the student or within the campus itself, right? When I was at grad school, we were all like, we're too busy for this. We're not doing it. But then also on the individual, right? Like the resources are there to take advantage of, if you take advantage of them. So doing things like signing up for mentoring, signing up for Career Commons, signing up for Navigator, volunteering for things, going to some of the free events, things like that. Which being a student is exhausting, right? So no judgment on how much or how little people are involved. But the resources are there, and they're there to support you. There has been an enormous push since I first joined the profession 10 years ago to now in adding services to directly support early career professionals. And a lot of that came out of the advocacy that I was part of 8 to 10 years ago coming out of INA around like this existential scream around how hard it is to break into the profession and how the profession is eating its young with like project positions and things like that. So coming out of that guttural scream has now been like much more support for these early career programs and support.
Oh, thank you. It's been extremely helpful, especially learning about the governance. I had not seen that chart. It was really, really helpful. Does anybody else have questions that we'd like to field for Lexy?
I would just like to thank Lexy very much for this valuable and now recorded intro. I'm a quick question. How would you measure Marak in terms of like $20 local membership and then a little more pricey, 55 for students and also for professionals, I would say, depending where they work. Your thoughts about that?
I think regional organizations are great. And I think both are great, and they're great for different reasons. So SAA has more resources for more robust programming, right? But Merrick, which is more regional, it's smaller, is very ideal for breaking into the profession. And they have their own mentorship program, which I also ran. Their mentorship program is also really good and really robust. And that's actually a fully cohort mentor program. So they only do cohorts, and those cohorts are fabulous. But the bar for like a presentation at SAA is way higher and way harder, right? Like they get like over 100 or something session proposals for each SAA, and they can only do like 30 something of them. Where Merrick, especially for your first conference presentation, is a much lower barrier, a much less imposing barrier. Merrick also has lots and lots of opportunities for volunteering. So for building that service portfolio that you can also take to SAA, right? So it's not necessarily one or the other, especially because Merrick is so cheap. Merrick, like for that first meeting, it's a much smaller, more intimate meeting where SAA, you can be talking 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, where a Merrick meeting is going to be a couple of hundred. So it's much easier to form networking, especially networks which are geographically closer to you. Merrick also has the caucuses. So each state has a caucus, and that caucus will provide its own programming. So I, having benefited from both, am a big proponent, especially as an early career, for getting involved in your regional organization. And I would never say like, never do regional, only do national, or never do national, only do regional. I think they're a complement to one another that can really help to start build your professional profile, especially when you're getting started, right? Merrick also has a new members breakfast. It has those mentoring cohorts. It like has programming at those meetings. It's smaller. You'll meet a lot more younger professionals there, and it'll just be less overwhelming. So do both, right? Especially as a student when those costs are so cheap. When I was at History Factory, I was a member of Merrick and not a member of SAA because Merrick was so cheap and I could get some of that programming from them. Even though like I will sing, now that I've been in SAA for so many years, I will sing the praises of SAA all day long. I think both are really valuable.
I totally agree. Even though this is an SAA student chapter, we devote a lot of our attention here to MERAC. We just had a event on the mentoring cohort program last September, and I'm currently in a cohort, and it's really great.
I'm so glad to hear that. I love the cohorts there.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has something to say, I think I'll stop the recording now.